all good things come in small packages, and so does jQuery. Now, jQuery is a tiny JavaScript library that transforms the web into an entertaining experience. It is definitely one of the most popular JavaScript libraries. Now, the motto of jQuery is to write less, do more, which is very apt because its functionality revolves around simplifying each and every line of code. Hi everyone, this is Shantini from Edureka, and in today's session, we will discuss some of the most frequently asked jQuery interview questions. So I hope these interview questions help you prepare better for your interviews related to jQuery. Now, before we begin the session today, don't forget to subscribe to our Edureka YouTube channel to stay connected. So let's have a look at some of the most frequently or most commonly asked jQuery questions today. Now, the first most commonly asked question is, what is jQuery? Now, jQuery is an efficient and fast JavaScript library that was created by John Resig in 2006. Now, as I already said, the motto is to write less and do a lot more. So this is basically a fast and concise JavaScript library that simplifies your HTML document traversing, event handling, animating, and AJAX interactions for rapid web development. jQuery is definitely a JavaScript toolkit that is designed to simplify various tasks by writing less code. jQuery has gained quite a lot of popularity because it just needs you to write a simple code and it's easy to understand, which also makes your work with JavaScript easier. As we all know, we need JavaScript for web development, and you need this language to build up a web page that is helpful to the users. That's exactly why jQuery has also gained its popularity in the recent times. So now that you know what is jQuery, the next question is, what are the different features of jQuery? Now, jQuery has already made it super easy to select the DOM elements, traverse them, and modifying their content by using cross-browser open source selector engine called the Sizzle. Now, some of the other core features also include the event handling. So the jQuery offers an elegant way to capture a wide variety of events, such as a user clicking on a link without the need to clutter the HTML code itself with event handlers. So it becomes pretty easy when all you have to do is just click on any particular link in order to go to any other website or perform any sort of event. It handles such occurrences pretty well. There's also the AJAX support. So the jQuery helps you a lot to develop a responsive and feature-rich site using the AJAX technology. Now, nobody wants a boring website. Whenever you're browsing through any web page or any site, you would want it to be interactive and also a treat to your eyes. So this is definitely where jQuery comes handy. Now, not just that, for a nice website, you also need animations. So the jQuery comes with plenty of built-in animation effects, which you can use in your websites. Now, in the early days when there was just new websites built, they were all plain and boring and there was nothing much happening in those. They were not very user-friendly either. Now, with the web development, there has been more features getting added on, and there are more features getting added on to the websites as well. So definitely people are looking for great user interfaces. Another advantage is that jQuery is a very lightweight library. So it is about size 19 KB, that is minified and zipped. So it becomes pretty easier to use it or install it, and it does not take up much space, and it is lightweight, so it does not have to be taken care of too much. There are a lot of other factors that make jQuery so popular because the jQuery has cross-browser support and works well in Safari, Chrome, Opera, etc. And not just that, it also supports the CSS3 selectors and basic XPath syntax. Basically, you can work with all the latest technology with the help of jQuery. Now, these were some of the features of jQuery that makes you believe that it is definitely one of the best libraries of JavaScript. So the next question is that what are the advantages of jQuery? So it is more like a JavaScript enhancement. So there is no overhead in learning a new syntax. If you know JavaScript, jQuery becomes very easy for you to understand and also to write a code in because it's pretty much the same. Now, not just that, it also has the ability to keep the code simple, readable, clear, and reusable. So when you see some example of how you write a code in jQuery, you can understand that it is very easy and also simple, readable, and clear. So basically, when you read that code, you can understand what it is trying to do or what you are actually working on. Another advantage is definitely the cross-browser support. So you have the Internet Explorer, Safari, Opera, and it supports all of these browsers. So you do not have to worry much while working with jQuery that which browser you should use or where you should be working on because it pretty much supports all of these. Next up, it would also eradicate the requirement for writing complex loops and DOM scripting library calls. So with the help of jQuery, you do not have to get too involved with the complex loops because it makes your work pretty easier. And definitely it helps in event detection and handling as well. Now any event occurring in any particular website becomes easier and is handled pretty well with the help of jQuery. So every time you click any button or you want any other event to occur, it is taken care of by jQuery. And finally, there are tons of plugins for all kind of needs. So you have all the plugins available while working on any particular website or any particular code. And if you need any plugin for your code or to build up something new, there's always tons of plugins available for all of your needs. Now moving on to the next question, what are selectors in jQuery? So when we talk about selectors, the basic operation in jQuery is selecting an element in DOM. Now this is done with the help of a $sign. So what we do with that $sign is construct a string parameter containing any CSS selector expression. So the $sign will return 0 or more DOM elements on which we can apply an effect or any style that you want. So this is where you design or provide more styles to your websites. So here we have one document.ready function which indicates that code in it needs to be executed once the DOM got loaded. So it won't wait for the images to load for executing the jQuery script. So we create an anonymous function inside the ready function to hide any division here. So what a jQuery selector does is, it is basically a function that makes use of expressions to find out the matching elements from a DOM based on the given criteria. So selectors are used to select one or more HTML elements using the jQuery. Now once an element is selected, then we can perform various operations on that selected element. So now that you know about selectors, moving on to the next question, how many types of selectors are there in jQuery? So here you can see that you have three main types where you have a tag name, then you have one ID, and then finally you have a class. So let's see what does the tag name does. Now before what it does, you can see that how you can write the tag name. So you have a syntax here where you have to give the $sign first, and then inside the brackets you have the div tag inside quotes. So what this does is it takes all the division tags in your document. So what happens, you have a selector as a tag name and you give the syntax as $ and div. So you use the division tag here. Now whenever it's checking your document or any code that you are writing, it will just consider all the div tags in the document. So basically it will take all the divisions in that particular document. Next one is the ID. So the syntax for ID is you have to write the $sign and inside the brackets you have hash text ID. So now in any particular document, wherever you have used this element ID, it will pick up this ID element as a text here. Now the next one is the class. So what happens for the syntax is that how you write it is inside the brackets you use .myClass or provide any name to that class. And also you have to mention the $sign as well. Now what happens here is it will select the elements with class as myClass. So suppose in your code or in your document you have created class and inside those class you have defined objects. So here what happens is whatever name you give in the syntax, it will pick up all the elements with class that is inside the class or that you have mentioned with a class will be considered as my class. So these are the different types of selectors that are used in jQuery. Now moving on, the next question is, what is jQuery.noConflict? Now jQuery.noConflict is an option that is given by jQuery to overcome any conflicts between the different JavaScript frameworks or libraries. So when we use the jQuery.noConflict mode, we are actually replacing the $sign to a new variable and assigning to jQuery some other JavaScript libraries. Also, we use the $sign, which is the default reference of jQuery, as a function of variable name what jQuery has. So the jQuery library and virtually all of its plugins are contained with the jQuery namespace. So as a general rule, global objects are stored inside the jQuery namespace as well. So you should not get a clash between the jQuery and any other library. Now by default, the jQuery uses the $ as a shortcut for jQuery. So if you are using another JavaScript library that also uses the $ variable, that is when the conflicts arrive. So in order to avoid these conflicts, we use the jQuery.noConflict mode immediately after it is loaded onto the page and also before you attempt to use the jQuery in your page. Next up, what are the various AJAX functions available in jQuery? Now, AJAX allows the user to exchange data with the server and also update parts of a page without reloading the entire page. So now there are various functions available for that. First one is the $.ajax. Now this is considered to be the most low level and basic of functions. So we use this function in order to send requests, and also we can use this function without any selector. The next one is the $.ajax setup. Now what does this setup function do is it is used to define and set the options for various AJAX calls. So now in case you're calling any function from the AJAX, you have to define and provide certain options while using the jQuery. This is exactly where you use the AJAX setup. For example, if you're using this setup, inside this you will provide the type that you're using, suppose the get or the post, and then if you're providing any URL to any other website, you can provide that URL inside the setup as well. Also, if you have any other styling to do inside that with the help of CSS and HTML data, you can also do that. Then we have the $.getJSON. Now this is a special type of shorthand function which is used to accept the URL to which the requests are sent. Now what are these shorthand functions? So basically they comprise of simply the wrapper function that call the $.ajax with certain parameters already set. Also, optional data and optional callback functions are possible in such functions. So these are some of the AJAX functions that are available in jQuery and that we use most frequently while working with jQuery. Now moving on to the next question, what are the methods used to provide effects? Now with the help of jQuery, you can really build up a nice website which is user-friendly and interactive. Now, in order to make it user-friendly and interactive, you need to add certain effects or you need to make it dynamic. Now, jQuery provides many amazing effects. The effect may be hiding, showing, toggling. There can be fade out, fade in, fade to, and a lot more. So for that, we have certain methods such as the animate method. Now, this function makes the custom animations for your HTML elements. So what you can do is you can add parameters such as your duration, the easing, the callback, or whatever animation you want to add inside your code. You can do it with the help of this method. You can have your customized animations for all your HTML elements. Then we also have the fade in method. Now this function fades in all the matched elements by adjusting their opacity and firing an optional callback after completion. You can also define the speed and also call the callback function here so that you can select any particular element. So those elements will be matched here and then you can see the fade in effect in them as well. Then we have the fade out method. Now this function is also used to fade out all the matched elements by adjusting their opacity to 0, then setting the display to none and firing an optional callback after completion. So you can either fade in your image or object, or you can fade out as well. Then there's the fade to. So this function fades the opacity of all the matched elements to a specified opacity and firing an optional callback after the completion. And finally, we have the stop method. So this function stops all the currently running animations. So no matter how many animations you have inserted in your code, once you use the stop method, it will discard all of that. The next question is, explain empty versus remove versus detach in jQuery. Now all these look similar. You might be thinking that these functions are used to perform the same task, but there are slight differences in all three of them. Now for the first one, we have the .empty method. So this method is used to remove all the child elements from matched elements. Suppose you want to remove any particular element, you will select that particular element and then use this empty method. So what happens here is that you will use the selector and then .empty method. So you can see the syntax as $selector.empty. Here what happens is whatever element you have selected will be matched from your document and will be removed from that particular document. Then next up we have the remove method. Now the empty method was only used for your child elements, but the remove method is used for all your matched elements. The syntax is also quite similar. You just have to use the $selector.remove method. Now this method is same as remove but does not remove the jQuery data. So it will remove all other elements apart from any of your jQuery data. So the syntax is $selector.detach method. Now the next question is, what are the differences between JavaScript and jQuery? Now jQuery is a library of JavaScript, and as I said before, these two are very similar even while writing the code. So you do not have to learn something very new while working with jQuery as well. But there are definitely certain differences between the two. So let's have a look. Now JavaScript is a dynamic programming language that is weakly typed. But when it comes to jQuery, it is a concise and fast JavaScript library. Also, JavaScript is a scripting language for controlling the document content and interface interaction, whereas jQuery is a framework that makes the AJAX interaction, event handling, and also animating faster and simpler. Basically, it makes your work in JavaScript easier. Now in JavaScript, we have too many code lines. That is, while writing the code, you can see that there are too many lines that you have to insert for writing a simple code. Whereas while using the jQuery library, you will see that there are fewer lines of code that you use. So while using this particular library, you do not have to work much on the code, and also you do not have to write too many lines. Now in JavaScript, you do not need to add any additional plugins as all browsers support JavaScript. But when it comes to jQuery, you may have to include the jQuery library URL in the header of the page. So JavaScript is basically supported by all the browsers, but there might be certain cases where jQuery is not accepted. So in that case, in the safer side, you should use the jQuery library URL in the header of your page. Now for the JavaScript, developers have to write code manually, so browser-related errors are likely to occur. Whereas for jQuery, the developers need not worry much as no error due to browser compatibility will occur. Now, not just that, in JavaScript, you may need to write your own script and it can be a time-consuming process. Whereas in jQuery, you only have to write the existing jQuery scripts, so it actually saves a lot of your time. And finally, the developers write their own code to handle the multi-browser compatibility in JavaScript. And in jQuery, you need not worry about multi-browser compatibility issues because it has the cross-browser support as well. Now we all know that JavaScript and jQuery are pretty much similar, but these are some of the differences between these two. The next question is, explain the with method versus the CSS with in jQuery. Now in jQuery, there are two different ways to change the width of an element. So one way is using the CSS width and the other way is using only the .width method. So here's an example. So while using the .css width, how we write the code is $mydiv.css width, 300px. So what happens here is we use the .css width in order to mention or declare any particular width that we want. Here we have defined it as 300 pixels. Whereas while using the width method only, all you have to do is just write #mydiv.width, and inside the brackets you have to mention the width that you want. Now the difference in .css width and .width is the data type of value you specify or return from both the functions. So in case of .css width, we have to add the px in the width value, while in .width we don't have to add. So when you want to get the width of my div element, then .css width will return 300 pixel, while .width will only return integer value as 300. Now moving on to the next question, explain the bind versus live versus the delegate methods in jQuery. Now the bind method will not attach events to those elements which are added after the DOM is loaded, while live and delegate methods attach events to the future elements also. Now the difference between the live and the delegate methods is the live function will not work in chaining. It will work only on an selector or an element, while delegate method can work in chaining. Now we will talk about chaining in the session further, but before that, let's have a look at an example. So this is how we use the ready function here. So we have the .ready function, and then we use the .find and then the .live method as well. Now this code will definitely not work using the live method, but using the delegate method we can accomplish this. So what happens next is that we use the ready function, and then here we have the delegate method instead of our live method. Now in the first one, while we have this chain of .find and .live, it will not work because we have used the live method and it does not work in chaining. Whereas in the next example, we have the table and then we have the .delegate method which works in chaining, so it will work in the second example. So here the elements will also be loaded even though attached later on. Now next question is, what is the use of the param method in jQuery? Now the param method is basically used to represent an array or an object in serialized manner. So while making any particular AJAX request, we can use these serialized values in the query strings of the URL. So here you can see the syntax for this method. So we use the $.param, and inside the brackets we have our object, array, or the boolean value. So you can declare your object and then you can provide array that you want to see, and then you can also provide any boolean value if you want to. Now the boolean value basically specifies whether to use the traditional style of the param serialization or not. And the object in array specifies an array or an object that are to be serialized here. Now another commonly asked question is that what is the difference between $this and this in jQuery? So you can see the difference between the two. One uses the dollar and also is written inside the bracket, and the other one is simply written as this in jQuery. So now both of them actually reference the same element, but the difference is that this is used in traditional way. But when this is used with the dollar and the brackets, it becomes a jQuery object on which we can use the functions of jQuery. So now we use the this element to point out to any particular element present in your code, or you want to specify any particular part of that document. But here, as soon as you use the dollar and the brackets, it becomes a jQuery object. So you can see an example where we have used $document.ready function. Then we have #clickme.click function. Now next up is an alert that says $this.text. So what happens here is that it becomes a jQuery object which is linked with the text. Whereas in the next one we have alert this.inner text. So this is used in a traditional way where we are just pointing to our inner text, and here we will have the alert as inner text or whatever we have inserted in our inner text, because with the help of this we are directly pointing to that particular position. So you have to keep in mind while working with these two so that you write it specifically about which one you want to use, and you should not get confused with the dollar and the brackets. So in case you want it to be an jQuery object, you must have it with the dollar and the brackets. Otherwise, you can use it in the normal way where you just use this keyword. Next up, how to create, read and delete cookies in jQuery. Now to deal with cookies in jQuery, we use the Do cookie plugin. So the Do is easy to use and having powerful features as well. So first we will see how we can create a cookie. So here we have the syntax to create or to write a cookie. So what we do is $.do, and inside the parameters we have your cookie name and cookie value. Now it is simple to create a cookie. All you have to do is provide any name that you want for your cookie and also provide that particular value that you want it to have. So all you have to do is assign the name and the value inside your $do and your cookie will be created. Next up is to read the cookie. Now even this has a simple method. So you have to do is $.do, and inside that you just have to provide the cookie name. So whenever you're creating any cookie, you provide that name and then you create that cookie. So if you want to read it, all you have to do is provide that name again. Now here you don't have to provide any value because that's what you're looking for and you're going to read that value. So you just have to specify the name of the cookie that you are looking for. And finally, how to delete a cookie. Even that is pretty simple. All you have to do is mention the cookie name and use the remove keyword. So you have to use $.do and then cookie underscore name and inside double quotes remove. So what happens here is that you will be redirected to that particular cookie name that you have mentioned and it will be removed. So for example, you have given any ABC cookie name before and you have created one with a value. Now you want to delete that cookie. All you have to do is just mention the ABC cookie name here and type the remove keyword. It will automatically be removed. The next question is, what is jQuery Connect and how to use it? Now, a jQuery Connect is a plugin used to connect or bind a function with another function. So connect is used to execute the function from any other function or plugin is executed. So basically, if you have two or more functions that you want to bind together or use them together, that is when you use the jQuery Connect. Now, how to use this connect? So you can download the jQuery Connect file from jQuery.com and then include that file in the HTML file itself. So all you have to do is use the $.connect function to connect any one particular function to another one. In this way, you can connect your functions that you want to bind together, or you want to execute them together, or you want to execute any other function from a different location itself. So this is how the jQuery Connect helps you. The next question is, what is the difference between jQuery.size and jQuery.length? So what does this jQuery.size method does? So it returns the number of element in the object. But it is not preferred to use the size method as jQuery already has this .length property which does the same thing, but the .length property is always preferred because it does not have the overhead of a function call. So basically both of these methods have the same work to do and they provide you the same value as well. And you can use any of these two in order to find the number of elements in your object. But it is not preferred to use the size method, whereas you can always go for your jQuery.length property as there will be no overhead or any function call taking place. It will also speed up your process and it will make your work easier. Now, what is this overhead? So the overhead occurs for small functions because execution time of small function is less than the switching time. So here you will use the .length method in order to reduce the function call overhead. Now this definitely makes your work easier and also does not involve too much hassle That's exactly why you prefer the later one than the former one. Moving on to the next question. How can events be prevented from stopping to work after an AJAX request? Now, in order to prevent the events from stopping to work after this particular request, we have two methods. Now, both these methods will handle this problem pretty well. Now, let's look at the first method. So, the first one is to use the event delegation. Now, what happens here is that it uses the event bubbling to capture the events on elements which are present anywhere in the domain object model. Now, event bubbling is something that you might have come across your JavaScript travels. So it basically relates to the order in which event handlers are called when one element is nested inside a second element and both elements have registered a listener for the same event. So this way it makes your work easier and also prevents the events from stopping. Next up, we have another method called as the event rebinding usage. Now, when this method is used, it requires the user to call the bind method and the added new elements. So again, here we use the bind method in order to call different functions together and bind them together so that it makes your process faster and easier as well. So you can see that there are two examples both for use of event delegation and also event rebinding usage. Now you can use any of these two in order to prevent the events from stopping to work even after an AJAX request has been made. Next up, explain what the following code will do. So here you can see that there's a code which is $div hash first, div dot first, ol hash items greater than, inside square brackets we have name dollar equals to first. Now this might look a little confusing with all the div hash first and then div dot first and then ol items. Ol here is the ordered list and then it has a name dollar equals to first inside the square brackets. So now what does this particular code do? So this actually performs a query to retrieve any division element with the ID first. So here we have the ID as first plus all the division elements with the class first. Now if you go back to the selectors, you would remember that with the hash first we have defined the ID and next up we have defined the class with the dot first. So there we had used the dot my class and here it's dot first, so it is the class and then plus all the elements which are children of the OLID which is equal to items. So this is where we have taken the ID where we have all the items which are the children of the element and also whose name attribute ends with the string first. So this is an example of using multiple selectors at once. So the function will return a jQuery object containing the results of the query. So if you go back to the selectors and come back, you'll understand that here we have declared the tag name, the IDs, the class and everything. And you will get the attributes that ends with string first as well because we have defined the name dollar equals to first. So any attribute that ends with the string first will also be considered here. Moving on, the next question is what is the difference between $window.load and $document.ready function in jQuery? Now, $window.load is basically an event that fires when the DOM and all the content on the page is fully loaded. So this event is fired after the ready event and in most cases the script can be executed as soon as the DOM is fully loaded. So ready method is usually the best place to write your JavaScript code. But there could be some scenario where you might need to write the scripts in the load function as well. For example, if you want to get the actual width and height of an image, you will use the other function. So as we know that the $window.load event is fired once the DOM and all the CSS images and frames are fully loaded. So it is the best place to write the jQuery code to get the actual image size or also to get the details of anything that is loaded just before the load event is raised. So now you know the difference because you have already seen what the .ready function does and here you know what the .load function does as well. So in case you want to get any actual value you would use the .window.load method or the load function to be specific. Now the next question is, what is a CDN and what are the advantages of it? So CDN actually stands for a content delivery network or content distribution network. Now this is a large distributed system of servers that are deployed in multiple data centers across the internet. So what happens here is that it provides you the files from servers at a higher bandwidth that leads to a faster loading time. Now, several companies that provide free public CDNs include the Google, Microsoft, Yahoo. So basically, you can get your data from a higher bandwidth. So with Google, you have data centers that hold all your data and information. Now, it's easier to access any sort of data with the help of Google because it provides you all of those from a server which is present at a higher bandwidth. And this will definitely reduce the loading time. That is, you will have a faster loading time here and it would not consume too much of your time and also provide you any sort of data that you are looking for. So now that you know what is a CDN, let's have a look at the different advantages of it. Now, the primary goal of the CDN is to provide content to the end users with high availability and also high performance. So some of the advantages of using CDN includes that it reduces the load from the server. It also saves the bandwidth. So the jQuery framework is loaded way faster from these CDNs. Now, if a user regularly visits a site which is using jQuery framework from any of these CDN, it will be cached. The next question is how to use a jQuery library in your project. Now for that we have the ASP.NET. So you can use a jQuery library in the ASP.NET project from downloading the latest jQuery library from jQuery.com and also include the references to the jQuery library file in your HTML or PHP or JSP or ASPX page. Now here is an example how you can do that. So here inside our script we have a source that leads to the scripts or the jQuery and provides the type that is text or JavaScript. Now these are the basic ways of how you write your JavaScript. Now here what you have to do is provide a script language. So here I've given it as JavaScript and then I have the $document.ready function alert test. So here what happens is we are using the jQuery library in our particular JavaScript project where we have this $document.ready function which is the jQuery object which is used to check if the document is ready or not, and then we give the alert test. As soon as it finds out that the document is ready for it, it gives the alert test. So here inside our JavaScript code itself we are using the jQuery library in order to perform the test. So this is exactly how you use the jQuery library in any of your project. Now moving on, what is the use of the serialize method in jQuery? Now the jQuery serialize method is used to create a text string in standard URL encoded notation. So it actually serializes the form values so that its serialized values can be used in the URL query string while making any AJAX request. So you just select one or more form elements like the input or the text area or the form element itself, and the serialized values can be used in the URL query string when making the request. So here you can see the example for the serialized method. So we have our document.ready function and then we have button.click function and then we have div.text form.serialize function. So here you use the serialize function in order to serialize a form in your jQuery while making the AJAX request. So here you have used the div tag and .text $form where you get all the text from the form, and here next up you will serialize with the help of serialize function. So here you are just serializing the form itself. So now that you saw what the serialize method does, next is what is the use of the val method in jQuery. Now the jQuery val method is actually used to get the current value of the first element in the set of matched elements. Now suppose you're trying to match any element from your document. What happens with the help of the val method is that you will get the current value of the first element only. So it will match with the first element in the set of all your matched elements. And also you can set the value of every matched element with the help of this val method. So here you can see the syntax or an example how you can do this. So first we have the button.click function. So as soon as you click the button, you have your input as text and the value for that is given as Edureka. So I'm just providing a value to my element that is to be matched here. So in case you provide the input text as Edureka, it will be matched with the value that I have provided here as Edureka. So this is exactly how the val method works in jQuery. Next up, what is jQuery UI? So we all know that jQuery is used to provide a better user interface experience and also create websites that look and can be used in a friendly manner and also which looks beautiful too. So what is this jQuery UI? So it is actually a set of user interface interactions, effects, widgets, and themes built on top of the jQuery JavaScript library. So the jQuery user interface works really well for highly interactive web applications with many controls or for a simple page with a Datepicker control. So what happens here is that in case you're trying to create any interactive web application with the help of your JavaScript, you use the jQuery library as well. So here the jQuery UI helps you to build that interactive web page or web application so that the user can easily communicate and you have different effects or interactions provided in this particular website or application that you're building. So it is definitely one very important part when it comes to building up any web pages with the help of your jQuery JavaScript library. Now moving on to the next question, what are the different ways to include jQuery in a page? Now there are different methods and ways that are involved while you're working with jQuery and how you include this in any page. So first of all, you have to have a local copy inside your script tag. So we saw various syntax and examples of how we wrote the codes in jQuery. So there is a script tag that you write every time you're writing a JavaScript code. So you need to have a local copy inside that script tag. Also, you must have a remote copy of jQuery.com. Not just that, you need to have a remote copy of the Ajax API as well. And then you need to have the local copy of the script manager control. And finally, there has to be the embedded script using client script object. Because you need all of these in order to include your jQuery in any particular page, you need to have it inside your script tag and also keep a remote copy of the jQuery.com. Ajax is also one important API that you use here. And also you need to have the manager control too. So these are the things that you must follow or that you must keep in mind while you're working with the jQuery library and if you're trying to include it in any of your web pages. Now the next question is, what are the 4 parameters used for jQuery Ajax method? So now while you're using the Ajax method, you must have certain parameters that you need to define. So let's have a look at those parameters. Now for that, we have 4 parameters specified here. The first one is definitely the URL. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to specify the URL to send the request, because without this you don't know which website to send the request to or where to lead it to. So you definitely need the URL to specify the particular location where you want to send the request. Then we have the type parameter. Now type parameter actually specifies the type of request. For example, if you want it to be the get or the post or whatever type you're going to specify here. Third, we have the data. Now this specifies the data that is to be sent to the server. Now, while you want to send a particular data or any particular document to your server, you need to specify that, or how would it understand what you're trying to communicate. So here you will use the data in order to specify that particular value. And finally, we have the cache. So whether the browser should cache the requested page or not is decided with the help of this particular parameter. So these are the 4 things that you must use while using the jQuery Ajax method, because otherwise there would not be a proper communication between the client server and the request might not be specified. Also, it must not get to know that what data you're trying to send. Moving on, the next question is, what is the use of HTML method in jQuery? So we all know that HTML, CSS, JavaScript are all interlinked, and how important these are to make your website look prettier. Now it all started with HTML, then there came the CSS, and finally we had the JavaScript with the development of web. Now while using the jQuery also you must have this HTML method. So this is used to change the entire content of the selected elements. So it replaces the selected element content with new contents. Now for example, if you have to change any content or any element inside your code, you just have to use the HTML method, and with the help of this you can provide the new content that you want to provide here. You can see the syntax here. We have the document.ready function, then button.click function. So you can see the example here. How we write the syntax for the HTML method is $p.html hello edureka.co. So it selects all the paragraph elements and changes it into hello edureka.co. Because we're using the HTML method, it will change the entire content of our selected element. Here we have selected the element to be P, which is our entire paragraph, and changing it into hello edureka.co. You can see that the edureka.co is also inside bold, so it will be highlighted as a bold tag. Now the next question is, what is the use of CSS method in jQuery? First we have seen how the HTML method is used to replace your elements or contents. Now we will see why we use the CSS method in jQuery. So the CSS method is used to get or set style properties or values for selected elements. So it actually facilitates you to get one or more style properties. Now this can be done in 2 ways. We all know that CSS is the cascaded style sheets, so we can provide styles, but there are 2 ways how you can use it in jQuery. Now the first one is to return a CSS property. So what we do is, here we have the alert as background color equals to p.css background color. So what we are doing is, we are providing any particular background color that we want to within the form of an alert, and this will change the style of your entire content. So here we are just returning any CSS property with the help of the alert method. The other way to do this is to set a CSS property. In the first one, we had returned a value with the help of the alert method. Here, we will just directly set a CSS property. So here we have selected the paragraph element and then .css background color as violet. In the previous one, we were returning a value, and here we have directly set a CSS property. So you have just used the CSS method and given the background color as violet directly. So these are the 2 different ways with which you can use the CSS method and also provide or get any particular style in your document. Now moving on, the next question is, what is jQuery Datepicker? Now, as per jQuery UI documents, the jQuery UI Datepicker is a highly configurable plugin that adds the Datepicker functionality to your pages. So what you can do is, you can customize the date format and language, restrict the selectable data ranges, and also add in buttons and other navigation options easily. So in case you don't want the date format as date month year and instead want to change it as month date and year, you can do it with the help of this. Now by default, the date picker calendar opens in a small overlay when the associated text field gains focus. Now for any inline calendar, you simply have to attach the date picker to a division or span. For this, you must use the jQuery reference in your HTML code. Otherwise, it will not work. So you can see the example how we have used it here. So inside our head tag, we have one link that goes to the code.jquery.com, and then we have our script tag which has the source to the code.jquery.com as well. Now you need to take the jQuery reference here. So from the first one where we have the value as UI/1.11.4, you're taking that reference and putting it inside your script source as well. So in the next one, you can see that you have that code.jQuery.com, and then you've taken the reference value in your HTML code. Because without the jQuery reference in your HTML code, this will definitely not work. Now the next question is define slide toggle method. Now with the help of this slide method, we can do the up and down element. To implement the slide up and down on element jQuery, we have three different methods. First we have the slide down, then we have slide up, and finally we have the slide toggle. Now first one is the slide down method. So this function is basically used to slide and hide an element on the down side. So you can see that how you can use the slide down method. So we have the button slide down dot click function login underscore wrapper dot slide down. So what happens here is that whatever element you have selected in your code or in your document and use the slide down method, that particular element will be used to slide down or hide it inside your web page or wherever you're using that particular element. So here you will slide it and hide that element on the down side. So you can either move it up or down. So in this case, with the help of the down method, you are pushing it downside. Next up, we have the slide up method. Now this function is used to slide and show element up. Now if you want to view any element, what you can do is you can push the element up towards your web application or web page and then view it to the users. So here what you do is you use the button slide up, and then whatever you want to slide up or show, whatever element you want to select, you select that element from your document and then use the dot slide up method. So with the help of this, it will just slide up and show the element that you have selected. And finally, we have the slide toggle method. Now this method is between the slide up and slide down method. So what happens is it either shows or hides an element in up or down side. So here you just have to use the slide toggle method, so it'll either show or hide or go up or down. So it does not have a specified direction for this. So you can just use it to toggle around in your web page or application. Moving on, the next question is what is slice method in jQuery? Now the slide method selects a subset of your matched elements by giving you a range of indices. So what it does is it gives you the set of DOM elements on the basis of its parameter. Suppose we have a start value or we have an end value here. So you can see the syntax for slice method. So where we have the slice and inside this method we have the parameters as start and end. Now you have to give the start value here, end is also optional. So start is basically the first and the mandatory parameter for the slice method. So this specifies from where to start to select the elements. Then we have the end. Now this is an optional parameter, so it specifies the range of the selection. This indicates where to stop the selection of elements excluding the end element. So in case you don't provide the end value, it will just take all of the document and it will select all the elements. And once you specify your endpoint, it will only select those particular elements that are between that range. Next up, what is the queue method in jQuery? Now in jQuery, the delay comes under the custom effect category. So its sole purpose is to delay the execution of subsequent items in the execution queue. Now this queue name is a name of the queue in which the delay time is to be inserted. Now by default, it is a effects queue. A effects queue is basically known as the effects queue. So any effect that you have provided in your queue and you want to delay the time for that, you use this method. Now for that you have your delay method as well. So you put the delay duration and provide this queue name. Now with the help of this, you can delay the time that is to be inserted, and also you can show your effects for as long as you want to and also delay the time according to your needs. So this is what the queue method does. Basically it provides you the queue name for which you want to delay the duration or you want to extend the time of any effect that you have added. The next question is how can we use array with jQuery? Now, arrays and objects are definitely the important elements that you work with whenever you're writing any code. So let's see how we use these while working with jQuery. So arrays are zero indexed ordered lists of values, and they are really handy for storing a set of values of the same data type. So you can see that how we use the array. So here we have a variable and a name declared for it, and inside the square brackets we define our array. That is, you can provide same data type and as many of it as you want and provide the list. Now in the first one you saw that both the preceding approaches are static declarations. Now in order to do some dynamic programming with arrays, we have an example here. So what we do is we provide the variable name as name array and do not define that array. Next up, we use the name array.push name1. So here what we are doing is we are pushing name1 as a value as our index 0 value for our undefined array, which we have declared for name array. In the same manner, you can push other values as well, and accordingly the index will be provided as well. The first name that you have pushed will be index 0, the next one will be index 1, and then index 2, and so on. So here the dot push is basically a jQuery function that is used in conjunction with arrays that adds an element at the end of the array. Now with the help of this dot push method, you can add as many elements as you want inside your array. Next up, what are the jQuery plugins? So we have talked a lot about the plugins and how it is used and where we have used in the previous questions. Now let's see what are actually these jQuery plugins. So plugins are basically a piece of code, and in jQuery plugins it is a code that is written in a standard JavaScript file. So these JavaScript files provide useful jQuery methods that can be used along with jQuery library methods. Now, any method that you use in plugins must have a semicolon at the end, and the method must return an object unless explicitly noted otherwise. Now use each to iterate over the current set of matched elements. It also produces clean and compatible code that way. So you must always attach the plugin to jQuery directly instead of using the $, so that users can use a customize via the no-conflict method as well. So this was about the jQuery plugins. Now moving on to the next question, what is the difference between map and the grep function? Now in the map method, you need to loop over each element in an array and modify its value, whilst the grep method returns the filtered array using some filter condition from an existing array. So you write it as $.map and $.grep, that is grep. So the basic structure of map is $.map array, callback, element of array, index in array. So what you do here is that you provide the array and then you call it back with the element of array and index in array. You provide the element and also the index value of it in the array. In this way, you just have to loop over each element in an array. Whereas you don't have to do such a long process when it comes to the grep method, because it will just return your filtered or your altered array with the help of some filter condition. It will just consider your existing array and it will use the filter condition to change it. Next up, what does the $sign mean in jQuery? Now, how can jQuery be used in conjunction with another JavaScript library that uses the dollar for naming? Now we have talked a lot about this $sign. Everywhere we could see that we have used this dollar symbol for jQuery, and we know that it is how you define things in jQuery. But also in JavaScript we have the $sign too. So how do we manage these two? Now the $sign does not have any special meaning in JavaScript, and it is free to be used in any object naming. But in jQuery, it is simply used as an alias for the jQuery object and the jQuery function. However, jQuery also has no monopoly on use of the $sign. So you may encounter situations where you want to use it in conjunction with another JavaScript library that also uses the dollar function. This will definitely create a naming conflict. So the jQuery provides the jQuery.noConflict method for just this reason. We have already seen what is this no conflict method in our previous question, and we have discussed how it works. So calling this method makes it necessary to use the underlying name jQuery instead in subsequent references to jQuery and its functions. Now the next question is, here we have a given HTML code, that is inside the div tag you have id equals to expander, and then there's a CSS code which has the div hash expander and the specified width is 100, height is 100 and the background color is blue. So now the question is, write a code in jQuery to animate the hash expander div, expanding it from 100 into 100 pixels to 200 into 200 pixels over the course of 3 seconds. So here what you have to do is just change the value. So what you can do is you have your hash expander and you have to use your animate method here. We have already talked about the animate method in our previous question, and we have seen how you can use it in order to change any particular pixel value or add any animations here. So inside the animate method, you can change the value of your width and height as 200 pixels. So here you have your width specified as 200 pixel and height as 200 pixel as well. Now, this may not be the exact code that you get while you are in any particular jQuery interview, but these are the type of codes that you are given, and also you would be asked to provide a solution for that particular code. So they might be using the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript together, and they might form a simple code and ask you to use any jQuery method or object to alter or provide a solution to that problem. So you must look around the same zone and look out for more such questions where you have HTML and CSS code involved as well as JavaScript code involved, and they're asking for problems that can be solved with the help of jQuery objects and methods. Moving on to the next question, what is method chaining in jQuery? Now in our previous answers also we have seen chaining a lot of times. We have seen how with or without chaining can affect certain methods. Now finally we will see what is this chaining in jQuery. So method chaining is basically a feature of jQuery that allows several methods to be executed on a jQuery selection in sequence in a single code statement. So the first example is without chaining and the second example is with chaining. You can notice that with chaining the button only needs to be selected one time, whereas without chaining jQuery must search the whole DOM and find the button before each method is applied. In the first one, you can see that on click you play a movie and then you have changed your background color as well, and then you have your .show method. But what happens here is that you have to search your entire DOM and find that button first. And then you have to apply all these methods. But with chaining, all you can do is chain them together. That is, on click you play the movie and then add the background color and then show the method. So in addition to yielding more concise code, method chaining in jQuery also offers a potentially powerful performance advantage. You do not have separate steps to perform these methods. In the first one, you had to do it separately, but in the second one, it takes place all at once. The next question is, what is the difference between jQuery.get and jQuery.ajax method? Now, jQuery.ajax is all the encompassing Ajax request method provided by jQuery itself. It allows for the creation of highly customized Ajax requests with options for how long to wait for a response, how to handle a failure, whether the request is blocking or non-blocking, that is, either it is synchronous or asynchronous, and what format to request for the response, and many more such options. Now the jQuery.get is basically a shortcut method that uses jQuery.ajax under the hood. So it creates an Ajax request that is typical for simple retrieval of information. And other pre-built Ajax requests are also provided by jQuery, such as the jQuery.post, .getScript, and also .getJSON. So these are some of the differences between the jQuery.get and also the jQuery.ajax method. Now let's move on to the next question. What is the use of jQuery.each function? So the jQuery.each function is a general function that will loop through a collection. Now array-like objects with a length property are iterated by their index position and value. Now the other objects are iterated on their key value properties. The jQuery.each function, however, works differently from the .selector.each function that works on the DOM element using the selector. But both of these iterate over a jQuery object. Now in the jQuery.each method, we are able to pass in an arbitrary array or object in which for each item you will have the callback function executed. And the $.each function loops over any type of collection, either an array or an object collection. So the jQuery.each function has a callback in which we pass the indexing value and the corresponding value of each item of the array each time. Now, for example, if we pass an array to each function, it iterates over times in the array and accesses both the current item and its index position, as you can see in this particular code. Next up, what is the difference between prop and attr, that is attribute? So the jQuery.attribute method gets the value of an attribute for the first element in the set of matched elements, whereas the jQuery.prop gets the value of a property for the first element in the set of your matched elements. So basically, one gives you the attribute and the other gives you the properties. Now, what are attributes actually? Attributes carry additional information about an HTML element and come in name equal to value pairs. So you can set an attribute for an HTML element and define it when writing the source code. For example, you just give an input ID and you have the text box, then you have a value as jQuery, you have the type as text, and then you mention it to be as read only or write only or whatever you want to insert here. So this is the difference between your property and your attribute. Now moving on to the next question, explain what the following code does. So here we have another code, that is $div.css with 300 pixel add p.css background color as blue. So here first we have the division tag and then we have the CSS with 300 pixel for the styling. Then we have added the entire paragraph element for which we have the background is color blue. So now let's see what this code does. So here you can see that there is a method chaining taking place. So this code uses the method chaining to accomplish a couple of things. So first, it selects all the division elements and changes their CSS width to the 300 pixel. Then it adds all the P elements, that is the paragraph elements, to the current selection. So it can finally change the CSS background color for both the division and as well as the paragraph elements to blue. So you can see that there are a lot of questions asked about the coding and what will be the output. So you must be aware of all the methods that are used in jQuery so that once you see a code that uses method chaining or any other method and uses CSS or HTML, so you must be aware of how these tags are used and what would be the output or why is it used, for what purpose. So you must look around such questions where you have codes and they would ask for outputs like this, or they would ask you to explain the code as well. Now moving on to the next question, differentiate between .js and .min.js. Now this min.js is basically the minified version of our jQuery. So jQuery library has two different versions. First we have the development and then we have the production. Now the other name for the deployment version is the minified version. That is where this .min.js comes. So considering the functionality, both these files are quite similar to each other. Being smaller in size, the .min.js gets loaded quickly, saving the bandwidth. That is exactly the difference between these two as well. We have one .js and then we have one .min.js. It simply provides you the minified version and just gets it loaded quickly and saves your time and also saves the bandwidth. Last but not the least, what are the features of jQuery used in web applications? Now we have seen the different features for jQuery, but we also know that it is used for web applications and web pages mostly. So what are the main features where we actually get to see the jQuery in our web applications? So for that we have our HTML or DOM manipulation. So JavaScript do not have any features related to the DOM. But JavaScript in the browser does include some intelligence about the DOM. So it defines the logical structure of documents and the way a document is accessed and manipulated. Now jQuery has that extra intelligence regarding DOM. Also, we have it for event handling. So jQuery introduced a feature called event handling. Now, events are actually actions. This means that you can write code that runs when a user clicks on a certain point of the page or when mouse is moved over a form element. jQuery contains many events, such as a user clicking on a button, moving a mouse over an element, and so on. And then we have the Ajax support. Now, if you create a search functionality in your website like Google search, when you enter text in the search text box, then without reloading the page, you see the related text. You can do it easily using the Ajax methods. Also, we have animations in jQuery. So the jQuery comes with plenty of built-in animation effects that you can use in your websites. For example, you have the animation show, hide, and so on. And in jQuery, the animate method is used for all of these. So you can use this method to change the size of your elements as well. Now with this, we have come to the end of our jQuery interview questions. Now these were some of the most commonly or frequently asked questions in any jQuery interview. But these were definitely some of the patterns that are also asked frequently. So you should also look for questions that are similar to these questions that I have discussed today. And also you must look for the coding problems that I have discussed and also find for more such questions along with their solutions. Now, I hope this session was helpful and definitely this will help you crack your jQuery interviews. If you know about more such questions that are commonly asked or you have attended any such interviews recently, do let us know about those questions as well in the comment section below. Also, don't forget to share your opinion in the comment section as well. Till then, thank you and happy learning.
I hope you have enjoyed listening to this video. Please be kind enough to like it, and you can comment any of your doubts and queries, and we will reply them at the earliest. Do look out for more videos in our playlist and subscribe to Edureka channel to learn more. Happy learning!